Right, I'm down with a cold, I've got a runny nose, my throat is killing me, and I'm sweating absolute balls, but this video has been forced upon me by the fact that Daniel Levy, for some reason, has left this decision to 10:30 on a Sunday evening when I'm supposed to be getting some sleep to recover from the illness I currently have, but yeah, this video has been forced upon me by the fact that the news has finally broke that Antonio Conte is no longer Spurs' manager. He has left by mutual consent, and yet to be fair, I think it was news that was a matter of when it was going to come rather than if it was going to come, to be fair, especially after that outburst of an interview following the 3-3 draw at St Mary's against Southampton last weekend. And yeah, in this video I'm going to be discussing, first of all, was it the right decision for him to leave or not? Second of all, going into a little bit more detail about the interview that, transcended this whole situation that has made him leave the club with immediate effect. Then answering the question, will Spurs be able to get themselves into the top four come the end of the season and qualify for the Champions League for next season? And then the final question, who will be Spurs' manager next season, because it has been announced by Fabrizio Romano as well. Adding on to that news that Conte has left, that Christian Stellani will be taking over the club until the end of the season and guiding them through until the end of the season in this last, 8 to 10 games with Ryan Mason alongside him. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. And yeah, as I said, we'll start off with, was it the right decision? I think it's fairly obvious for everybody to see that it was probably the right decision and the right time for him to go. And I mean, look, it's been a complete mess for Spurs over the years, really, given the fact that they hired Jose Mourinho after sacking Mauricio Pochettino just to literally have any sort of hope of getting them over the line for a piece of silverware, and then Mourinho ends up getting sacked as a smokescreen during the whole, European Super League outburst in April 2021, a week before a Carabao Cup final, which they eventually lost to Man City with Ryan Mason in charge. Then they appoint Nuno Espirito Santo after trying literally the whole summer to get Antonio Conte in. He rejects Spurs' advances, and yep, Nuno is in the door for literally 5 minutes. I think he managed like 7 or 8 games. Then Spurs up the ante for Conte, give him an absolutely incredible wage, and Conte only signs, a 2-year contract, because I think that showed from the off that he really didn't want this job and kind of just wanted the financial package, really. And look, I think he took over the job thinking that, to be honest, it was a win-win situation for him, because if he did get sacked, he'd obviously be getting a massive payout given the wage he was on at Spurs, and if he ended up winning something, he would have been the manager that, finally won something for Spurs. But if he didn't, which obviously he hasn't done, it's, not solely pinned on him, because of course many managers in the past, pretty much every manager in the Daniel Levy era, apart from Juan de Ramos, who obviously won a Carabao Cup in 2007 or 2008 I should say, has failed to deliver trophies for Spurs overall, so it wouldn't be solely pinned on him. So yeah, I think that's essentially what's happened with Antonio Conte, to be fair. And obviously you can tell by the interview, and even the way Conte has been all season long, he's just bitched and moaned every single opportunity he's got, every single poor result that has gone against Spurs. He's just been absolutely negative as you can be as a manager, and the Spurs fans have really, not taken to that. And look, whether he was right in the interview or wrong in what he said, I think is besides the point. In my personal opinion, I think that some of the things he did say were right in terms of the culture at the club, the mentality at the club overall, the spirit of the club and of the players. Obviously, he went to absolute town on the playing squad and on Daniel Levy. He never blamed the fans or himself, for that matter, ironically as well, even though I do think that as the manager, he does have to take at least a little bit of the blame for himself. And yeah, like I said, I think he's right given the fact that, to be fair, it's a mismatch. Antonio Conte is a serial winner. The same thing with Jose Mourinho as well. It's very hard to turn a club like Spurs, with the culture they have, despite the fact they've got some world-class players like Harry Kane and Heung-min Son when Conte walked in the door, and obviously a beautiful stadium, one of the best stadiums in the world of football as a matter of fact. But it's very hard to, transcend a club who have no history whatsoever of winning trophies into a superpower that, wins trophies. And yeah, exactly the problem that Antonio Conte faced, hence why it hasn't worked whatsoever. And to be fair, I actually think it's become a case where Daniel Levy, after he sacked Mauricio Pochettino, kind of sold his soul to the devil a little bit, in terms of the fact that obviously Spurs with this team, they had a fan base that, to be fair, just really wanted their teams to play a pretty brand of football and be entertaining and be, good in the eye, which is completely why he traded for Mourinho, for Nuno Espirito Santo, and for Antonio Conte, who all just play, let's be honest, very conservative and pragmatic football. And it hasn't worked, because the only reason why Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho in particular were signed by Spurs was to get them over the line for a trophy. It obviously hasn't happened, and Spurs are back to square one, where their fans are completely lost at this moment in time. I was chatting to one of my friends who's a Spurs fan on Twitter there a few days ago. He was saying that he speaks for the majority of the Spurs fan base in terms of the fact that they were absolutely sick of Antonio Conte, his negativity in press conferences, and the evident fact that he didn't give two fucks about Spurs overall. To be fair, I think that was pretty obvious for everyone with two brain cells to rub together to see overall. And that's why I think overall it was the right decision. Whether, as I said, what he said in the interview was right or not, I think is besides the point. And I think that as a Chelsea fan, I can vouch for Spurs fans in this. I've been through that already in the 2017-18 campaign, which was one of the worst campaigns I've ever endured as a Chelsea fan, arguably worse than this season, where Antonio Conte came in. He was a breath of fresh air. His passion, his winning mentality was absolutely second to none. Came in, steamrolled the Premier League in his first season without European football. Second season, sold Diego Costa and Nemanja Matic to, kingpins in the team that won the title the year before, replaced them really badly with signings like Danny Drinkwater, Bakayoko, Morata, for example, Zappacosta, and just bitched and moaned the whole season. We ended up playing some absolutely mind-numbing football, losing 1-0 to Man City with like 20-something odd percent possession, losing 4-1 to Watford and losing 3-0 at home to Bournemouth in the space of a week. And yeah, it was just one of the most depressing times to be a Chelsea fan whatsoever, and you could just tell from the moment the season kicked off, Antonio Conte was looking for an excuse to get out and be sacked by Chelsea, which of course he was at the end of the season. And yeah, it's a very similar situation to what he's enduring as Spurs manager right now, and hence why he has been sacked, which I think a lot of Spurs fans will be, happy to see the back of him, to be fair. I just think it was the wrong fit. Like I said, didn't care about the club whatsoever. It was clear to see he was only there for a payday and maybe the off chance that he might be able to be the saviour that finally delivered a trophy for Spurs, but it's been completely anticlimactic this season, going out to AC Milan in the round of 16 in the Champions League with an absolute whimper, conceding a goal within the first 3 minutes of the first tie against AC Milan, and then that's all that happened really. Went out with little to no fight, losing in the FA Cup recently to Sheffield United, being knocked out in the Carabao Cup in its early stages. So yeah, it's been a complete and utter anticlimax for Antonio Conte as Spurs manager, I think it's fair to say. And look, in terms of the big question, where do Spurs go now? I think that obviously, as I said, Christian Stellani is going to be in charge until the end of the season, which I think is probably the right choice in terms of the fact that Daniel Levy with this one won't want to rush into any decision anytime soon. There's obviously going to be a host of managers linked with them now, like Mauricio Pochettino, for example, who obviously was probably their most successful manager in the Daniel Levy era, despite the fact he didn't win them any trophies. Julian Nagelsmann is also going to be one that's very high up on the list after, of course, he was dismissed by Bayern Munich during the week, and there'll probably be 2 or 3 more options as well that I can't think of off the top of my head. But in terms of who I think they should go for, I think that although it would seem for a few Spurs fans that maybe it would be a sign of, going backwards or retreating on progress, I think Pochettino is the right option, just given the fact that I think that it's important for Daniel Levy right now, in my opinion, to just get the fans back on side. And I think a manager like Pochettino that the fans can really get behind, in terms of the fact that he obviously gives them a reason, I suppose, to support the team and back the team, and he's a manager that they can really identify with, given how loved he was by Spurs fans, and obviously is still loved after his tenure at Spurs, where he really made them believe that they could win Premier League titles, win a Champions League, where they lost marginally in the Champions League final to Liverpool after the drama in Amsterdam in the semi-final in 2019. He obviously plays decent football as well that Spurs fans can, really back as well, and I think if Pochettino was to be backed a lot better than he was in his previous tenure, I think that he could be a very good appointment for Spurs, and yeah, I think is probably the one that makes the most sense given the fact that he is a project manager, and I think he's one that I think will be a breath of fresh air for Spurs fans, and I think they'd really, really like to see him back. But Spurs fans, let me know if that's your opinion or not in the comment section below, because of course I don't speak for Spurs fans when I say that, it's just my humble opinion. And in terms of whether Spurs can get top 4 this season, to be fair, I've heard a lot of Spurs fans say, and it's completely true, I don't think they give a fuck whatsoever if they do qualify for the Champions League this season, because it's gotten to a stage now where they kind of just feel like they're making up the numbers in the Champions League now, and that tie against AC Milan over 2 legs completely proves that. Obviously Daniel Levy and the board won't think like that, because obviously there's a massive financial gain for getting into the Champions League, and yeah, with Champions League football comes more investment into the playing squad, which ideally you do want this summer. And to be fair, I'm looking at the Premier League table now, I think it's going to be a really, really close run in terms of the fact that Spurs are currently 2 points above Newcastle in 4th place, but Newcastle do have 2 games in hand. Liverpool also have 2 games in hand over them. If they win them both, they will go to within 1 point of Spurs, and you'd have to say Brighton are in there as well, because Brighton actually could go ahead of Spurs if they win their 3 games in hand over them, so it's going to be tight. Right, so I was a little bit too broke up last night, and to be fair, kind of still am to a certain extent, but nevertheless, I completely forgot to give you my top 4 prediction in the end. But yeah, just short and simple, I think that Spurs will just about have enough to get into the top 4. I think that this change of management in this last 10 or so games will give Spurs a little bit of a boost and their players, and I think they will have a little bit more belief now than they did under Antonio Conte towards the last few weeks. I think they'll pip Newcastle, who will maybe tense up in the last few weeks of the season. I think that it's probably too far away from Liverpool now at this stage, given the form they've been on this season, and I think that Brighton will just not have enough. But yeah, long story short, I think Spurs will finish in the top 4. Again, not like any of your fans give a shit whatsoever, but yeah, there we go. It's just whether or not Christian Stellini and Ryan Mason can get a new manager bounce, I suppose, out of this Spurs team and get, you know, Heung-min Son firing, for example, and get a little bit more spirit and just passion back into this Spurs team, because it really feels like it's been drained in the recent times under Antonio Conte, and it really looks like Spurs as a club at the moment have been really stale for quite some time now. And yet, just finally on the point of Pochettino being the man I think that, you know, should replace Antonio Conte at the end of the season, I just think it's come to a stage now where Spurs have tried this, you know, stopgap manager system where they go for someone like a Mourinho or a Conte who just tries to get them over the line for a trophy. It hasn't worked, evidently, and I think they need to go back to the roots of, you know, getting a manager in that excites the fans, identifies with the fans, plays nice football, and allows Spurs fans to, you know, dream, really, which is exactly what Pochettino did during his first tenure in charge of Spurs. And yeah, that's what I think Spurs should do come the end of the season. But yeah, like I said, Spurs fans, let me know in the comment section below, because yeah, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this one. Who should take over at the end of the season? And obviously your opinions on whether it was the right decision or the right time for Antonio Conte to leave the club. I'm sure it'll be pretty unanimous in your, you know, thoughts on that one in the comment section below, but let me know nevertheless. And yeah, leave a like on the video if you did enjoy. It would be massively appreciated. Also, if you could subscribe to the channel as well, that would also be hugely appreciated, because we are looking to hit 2,000 subscribers on this channel as soon as we bloody well possibly can. So every single one of you that hits that subscribe button would be an absolute legend and help me get there as soon as possible. I'm sweating my off, and yeah, I'll chat to you guys in my next video. So yeah, chat to you later.